we'll check that, mark it down the tags and everything. And then we'll be teaching 6 and 7 tonight. So,
6 and 7 tonight.
So, to go through the homework, lesson 4.
5. Okay.
No.
Mine all the way up to 9. Next week, I'm gonna go ahead and get next week already too. I take my book to work with me. I get it next week. I got 4 or 5, and they get 6 done. They get 6.
Okay, so lesson 4, as far as checking answers and everything. If y'all want to. Fill in the blanks.
Can you trust my answer?
Explain that.
Okay. First one is Levi. And what's the next? Nadab and Abihu. Alright, they were consumed with fire from God because they offered strange fire, which God had not commanded. The book of Numbers tells the story of Israelites wandering in the wilderness before leaving Mount Sinai. Moses numbered the fighting men of Israel, found there were
603,550.
Okay, I would have taken 2 different answers. 603,550 in Numbers 1 and 46, 600,000 in Numbers 9 and 21.
What's the number? What's the other number?
Numbers 9, 21. That's 600,000.
600,000.
Alright, the plans of God to invade Canaan were changed because Israel believed the report of the 10 spies instead of the report of Joshua and Caleb. Because of this, Israel was made to wander in the wilderness for
40 years.
what?
I got 40.
40 years. How many years?
One day.
1 year for each day. Spies were in. 2, no person over 20 years old when Israel left Egypt was allowed to enter Canaan. Only Joshua and Caleb were allowed to enter Canaan out of all the people over 20 that left Egypt. All right. Did she copy one down?
Wrong. Oh,
Oh,
for real.
I didn't sleep, so I didn't got from him because I got it wrong.
All right, match the following. First one is,
They got me master bomb.
Oh, this was hard.
Who
250.
it?
so the book which deals
A
with
few
things
numbers. That's
pertaining,
what we had, a few numbers.
Oh.
page 21.
Wow.
Page 21.
Okay.
All right, the book that deals with the things pertaining to the Levites is
Leviticus.
B.
Levites.
The book that records the death of Nadab and Abihu.
B.
B.
Brick. Bob. Boy.
Wait, which one? We on 2 or 1?
We're on number 1. A book that deals with things pertaining to the Levites. Number 2, the person plagued with leprosy for 7 days.
D.
D, the sister of Moses. What was her name?
Mary.
Miriam. 3, the first high priest of Israel.
Yeah.
F, which is the brother of Moses. That was Aaron, right?
No, yeah.
Alright, no No bullying in class.
See, I wrote all the wrong answers down and I went back and put the right one down.
Right, scrambled up. Yeah. My dad had a situation like that, so he was in college, right, and there was an English professor that gave multiple choice. And Dad said after a couple of quizzes, he started noticing that the answers were always in a pattern. And he said, after that, he said, I'd read the question and make sure the pattern fit, but he said, it was always a pattern. He said, I'm acing everything, so the other guys in the class said, how are you acing everything? He said, well, there's a pattern. Really? Tell us. So he said, I told them what the pattern was. So man, they all, well then it came down to the final test, and the professor changed it. He said, of course I couldn't tell him, we're in the middle of the test, but he said, I'm sitting over there and I'm going, he changed the pattern. And then so he said, so I'm giving them the change, and he said, all them other guys just, they mark them down, they throw their paper in, walking out,
Done deal.
Gotta pay attention. Number 4, the book that tells of the Israelites in the wilderness.
Hey.
A, the book which records the numbers of the fighting men of Israel. I'm like you, Pam. I didn't like the way they did this one. They made it harder than it had to be.
Realize how
I was confused. I was just going by
Yeah.
the questions. I asked you. Like the first one, I said Leviticus, pertaining to the Levites.
Yeah, but it was matching. You had to match it to something.
Yes, I didn't imagine we had.
Hey, you can't put any answer down, right?
All right, number 5. The man who led a rebellion of 250 chief men against Moses.
See,
C. That is the man that got swallowed up by the ground. And then number 6. The place where God sent the quail to Israel. E. That is the place which Moses also selected 70 elders to assist him.
Few numbers is hard.
Do what now?
This next is hard.
Hard, okay. Let's see how hard. Let's see how hard it was.
Mhm.
All right, number 1. If Moses married a Cushite woman, write 250 in the blank. If not, write 125. What's good? 250. If Aaron was allowed to see Canaan, add 25. If not, divide by 2.
125.
You divide by 2.
I got a dot, one.
So you divide by 2 gets you an answer of 125. Number 3, if the 12 spies gave their report at Kadesh, subtract 5. If not, multiply by 4.
120.
Subtract by 5, get 120. If the children of Israel were defeated by Og, add 16. If not, add 0.
120.
You still at 120, add 0. Number 5, if Aaron and Miriam rebelled against Moses, subtract 20. If Korah rebelled against Moses, add 120. And if both rebelled, divide by 3. 40. So you divide by 3, you get 40. So your answer
At least
should
I
be.
got 40 at the bottom.
That's what I knew, that's why I knew I had to go back.
Got that right.
Hey, that's all right. Check yourself.
Yeah,
Check
we
yourself.
won't see this on the test.
Oh, yeah, I need to put this one on there.
I ain't
All
prepared.
right. Let's see. So let's go ahead. Let me ask this question because we've got extra homework to go over tonight because we got to do 3 instead of just the 2. Y'all want to go ahead and do the answers now to 5
Yes.
and 6?
Yes.
Because y'all turned those in, so we're just making sure you got the right answers.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll go into the teaching. All right, cool. So, on 5,
Be a hostess.
all right. Name 5 of the 10 Commandments. Now, this one should be a gimme. This is a layup, right? So all y'all have to do is look up the 10 Commandments, right?
It said don't look. It said do not look.
I ain't putting one I knew. Number 5.
You ain't number 5? You good deal.
So, if y'all remember,
Sure
I don't remember if it was last week or week before we talked about that though, that the first 4 were between us and God, then number 5 was between us and our parents, or, and then number 6 through 10 was us and the rest of the world, So if you think about it from that perspective, you can kind of help yourself walk through, okay, what are the ones that deal with God? Don't make any idols, don't take his name in vain, don't have any other gods before him, so you do that, then you, okay, right, now I got those. Now what's the one with the parents? Okay, honor your father. You know, then you go through all the real popular ones. Don't steal, don't kill, don't.
2 years.
Yeah. So I'm gonna trust that y'all got 5 out of 10. Number 2, how long was Israel in Egypt?
40 years.
400.
In Egypt,
400.
400 years.
200 years.
That was first to go read it again.
Let me reread this.
All right, number 3. Name the mountain on which God appeared to Moses in a burning bush.
Mount Sinai.
Mount Horeb.
Yeah, or Sinai, Mount Sinai. I thought they said.
I guess it was later called Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
So, all right. Approximately how long was Israel camped at Mount Sinai?
2 years.
2 years?
3 months.
2 years. It goes down. It's a lot in there. If it goes down, no, it says 2 years, then it goes down, like she said, over a year. Then you have another thing that says, this is a vague question. No, it is. It don't say when were they.
It don't say exactly. It says approximately. So we're estimating. But how long would you estimate they were there?
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. I got 2 years.
So if you go to Exodus 19, verse 1, it tells you day 1 of month 3, which is the month of Sivan, is when they got there. And they stayed there until Exodus 10, verse 11, which is day 20 of month 2. Okay, so it wasn't just 30 days, so that was month 2 of the next year, right? Yeah, well, it was month 3 to month 2. So you know it had to be about a year, right? If you calculate that, that's 11 months and 19 days, or you could say approximately 1 year.
It just said over a year in the narrative, that's why it was 1 year.
But yeah, I got a question on that. I'm gonna come back to that when we get done. No, seriously.
Well,
I got.
No, I'm not gonna let y'all even know.
Seriously,
That's
I asked you later.
and I had to look this up. But, well, how? It don't even tell you. And then I had to go find out. Okay, well, when did they get there? When did they leave? How much time is between? Okay, well, that's 11 months and 19 days. So, all right. Number 5. Where did Israel build a golden calf and worship it?
On the foot of Mount Sinai.
At the base of Mount Sinai. Number 6. What did Nadab and Abihu do which caused God to destroy them?
Offer strange fire.
Offer strange fire. That's in Leviticus 10 and 1, if you want to know where that's at. Number 7. Name 5 of the 10 plagues that God sent to Egypt.
This one I messed up.
Locusts, frogs, lice, flies, and hail.
I got gnats. Like I said, don't look, so I didn't know.
So,
That's what he said. That's what he said. Nats.
I didn't even look.
So they, in order, they are blood, frogs, lice, flies, the murrain or the pestilence, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and then finally the death of the firstborn. And all those are between Exodus 7 through Exodus 11. Number 8. How was Israel guided by day while in the wilderness? Cloud. And by night? Fire. Who was smitten with jealousy for rebelling against God?
Moses.
Excuse me, leprosy.
Jealousy.
Sorry, I guess I'm tired too. Number 10. What punishment was sent to the Israelites as a result of their murmurings while compassing Edom?
Fiery serpents.
Fiery serpents. That's in Numbers 21, 4 through 8. Number 11. Name the 2 kings whom Israel defeated prior to their confrontation with the Moabites.
Sihon and God. OG.
Sihon and OG.
When Moses Sihon,
Sihon, S-I-H-O-N. He was the king of the Amorites. And Og, O-G,
yeah, OG.
the king of Bashan.
Everybody OG.
Because he is the OG. All right, what animal spoke to a man in the book of Numbers?
Donkey.
A donkey. That's in Numbers 22. Name the 2 1/2 tribes that agreed to settle on the east side of the Jordan River,
Reuben,
Reuben,
Gad,
and half of them.
Manasseh.
and half the tribe of Manasseh. Right. Now Manasseh is not one of the children of Jacob, one of the children of Israel. So how are they a tribe? Y'all remember that? Go back and look at the children of Jacob. What page is that on?
See,
Yeah, page 10. Yeah, see if you can find Manasseh in that table.
there
Ain't
it is,
there.
right there.
Let me ask you another one. Do you see Ephraim in that table? Mm-mm. So, how could Ephraim and Manasseh be tribes when they're not even children of Jacob?
And children of somebody else.
They are children of somebody else. Children of somebody significant.
Joseph.
Joseph. So Joseph had 2
Well, they
children.
still have lineage.
So he had 2 children, but he was in Egypt. And when Jacob came to Egypt and then he was getting ready to die, he put his blessing on all of his sons, but he gave his blessing on Joseph to Manasseh and Ephraim. And so, because the Levites don't have property possession, Joseph's 2 sons each got a possession, whereas, everybody else just got the 1. Joseph's sons got 2. Just something to note if you didn't know that. Number 14. How old was Moses when he died? 120. That's in Deuteronomy 34:7. 15. From what mountain was Moses permitted to gaze into the promised land?
Mount Nebo.
Mount Nebo. That's in Deuteronomy 34. Number 16. From which mountain was Israel to read the curses when the nation had conquered Canaan? Mount Ebal. And which one from the blessings?
Gerizim.
Gerizim, right? Gerizim. I think it's how you say it, Gerizim.
It works for me.
Deuteronomy 27, that's where that is. 17. Who was appointed to succeed Aaron?
Eleazar.
His son Eleazar. That's in Numbers chapter 20. What happened when he succeeded
Say
Aaron?
numbers what?
Numbers 20. What happened when Aaron's stuff was given to his son Eleazar? We talked about that last week.
I wouldn't make sure I have an excuse.
Aaron dropped dead. So
Oh, yeah.
Moses took all the garb off of Aaron and put it on Eleazar, and then Aaron died. So kind of the passing of the torch, literally. All right. And then who succeeded Moses?
Joshua.
Joshua. Okay. So hopefully you got all those. All right. Now the sin of Balaam tells you to read these passages. What love did y'all know about Balaam before this? Okay. Did you learn anything?
That the donkey got.
Lots.
Learned a lot, actually.
All right. So what love did Balaam have which caused him to go astray?
Money?
Wages of wickedness.
Wages of unrighteousness, or different translation probably say wickedness. Number 2. What did Balaam do that caused Israel to sin?
They food sacrifice to idols and committed sexual immorality.
Right. So what did Balaam do? That's what Israel did, but what did Balaam do?
He counseled Israel to use.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
he was
Disobey.
So basically he told Balak, hey, if you get them to do this.
He told him how to.
He's the initiator.
Right. Number 3. Numbers 31:16 mentions the counsel of Balaam. On the basis of the New Testament, tell the counsel which Balaam gave to Balak.
Use harlots.
to entice the Israelites to be unfaithful to the Lord.
Basically, cast a stumbling block in front of them, get them to trip up, and they will fall out of the blessing of God because they turned their back on Him. They start going to harlots, they start worshiping idols, and eating meat offered to other idols, and stop worshiping God. Number 4, why did he give this counsel to Balak?
So God would curse Israel.
He wanted a reward.
He wanted the money. Show me the money. He didn't even want to curse
His
it.
heart wasn't right.
He just wanted the money.
Mm-hmm.
Number 5, after reading the story of Balaam, can you see anything that would indicate that Balaam's donkey was smarter than he was? And if you did, what is it?
The donkey rebuked him and restrained him.
That's good. Anybody else?
Don't you have no sense to fear the angel of the Lord?
Right.
That's what I said, he was able to identify an angel. And he was talking to him.
So, all those are good answers. I'm going to accept all as right. What I put is that the donkey had to reason with Balaam. So, Balaam couldn't see the angel. He was hidden. But somehow the donkey was able to see it. Okay, so can you blame Balaam for that? Well, if you can't see it, how do you know to avoid it, right? Secondly, like you said, the donkey had to restrain him and redirect him, and that's true. But I think what shows that the donkey might have been smarter than Balaam is that when God gave him speech, he had to reason with Balaam. He had to tell him, look, have I not done this? Have I not been faithful? Have I not tried to take care of you? Why are you beating me now? And Balaam had to come to his senses then. So,
The donkey assumed he could see.
yeah. you can't see that?
Yeah, look.
All right, extra exercises. Y'all do the extra exercises?
I
I
tried.
didn't understand it.
I tried.
No, I mean,
All right, number 1. Hebrews 2:2 emphasizes that every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward. That was under the Mosaical law. Give 4 examples of transgressions which received a just recompense of reward. And I'll grant you, it was a little confusing. I had to think about it a little bit myself. I had to figure out, well, what kind of answer are they looking for? So, bottom line is, what is the sin, the transgression, and what do you get for that?
My thing was, where are we looking to get these answers? That was my thing.
So what I did
I understood
was,
that.
I went back to what the sin, what I saw some sins were.
Mhm.
And we may see, it's the justified, it's what God did to them as the,
Just recompense.
Yes,
Right.
was that right?
Mhm.
Okay.
So you go back to all the law that was given.
Okay.
If you do these things, then you will die.
Okay.
Because pretty much all of them were, if you break these
Yeah.
laws, you're going to
Back
die.
then, you died. You
So-
said you died.
So every one of them I put, idolatry. Don't have any idols.
Gotcha.
You're going to die.
I did that.
Don't murder anybody, or you're going to die. Don't practice witchcraft, or you're going to die. And don't commit adultery, or you're going to die. I mean, those were the 4 that I put there.
Okay.
So basically, that's what they were asking. Let's see, number 2, regarding the history of Israel in the wilderness, which we have just concluded studying, Paul said, quote, "Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition." That's in 1 Corinthians 10:11. Name the 3 lessons that you have learned that are applicable to your life, and tell from what historical event you learned that true lesson. So that's a very personal question. What lessons did you learn? And instead of giving 3, just maybe if you've got one, if you wrote one down, just give one. Anybody?
Some people didn't get to see the promised land because they didn't, me.
They're talking about how we don't worship me anymore.
Some people didn't get to see the promised land because they didn't listen to God on the journey to there, and that for me is to obey, to listen to what God is saying,
And don't that suck?
what He tells
Don't
me.
that suck? That you knew God brought you out of slavery, protected you through all this, and then here's a promised land. All you got to do is go in and get it. And you believe a negative report. After God done told you, I've already brought you here for this reason, to give you this land, and you don't want to believe that. So then you get to spend 40 years wandering around the wilderness, going through all this stuff, just to come back here to go in again, but you don't get to go in. because you didn't believe. So you gotta die before everybody else can go in. That just suck.
You know, what got me was like when he told Aaron and Moses that, you know, strike the and
Speak to it.
Speak, yeah,
Name.
and they turned it in, and I don't know if they were knowingly doing this or whatever, because we have, as humans, we have a tendency to do that. And man, the punishment for that was
Severe.
very severe.
But the evidence was there, so God was showing each time I'm God. And
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, you know, sometimes unknowingly we'll do stuff and be like, Pam and Jason did this. Knowing that God is the one that actually blessed us to be able to do that.
And that's the key. So when God told them to go speak to the rock to bring the water for them, he said, I want you to speak to the rock, command the rock. But they stepped up there and said, how many times we got to do this for you? Bam!
Out of
So they
frustration.
they were frustrated.
So
They were
they
angry.
took it away from God.
And they took glory from God
Mhm.
on themselves. You know, and I mean, from a human standpoint, they deserved it because they were following God. They were obeying God. And if it hadn't been for them, these people would have been dead already. But you can't take glory from God. He don't allow that. And the minute we take glory from God, there's consequences.
I really try to be mindful of that.
Okay.
Now.
Yes.
So the three lessons I put down is, the event is the promised land, and that the lesson is that we have to believe God. If you want to get to the promised land, you've got to believe God. Second one I put down is the Exodus. So coming out of the Exodus is that God will deliver. Whatever my situation is, God will deliver me. And then lastly, I put that the water from the rock and the manna from heaven taught me that God is my provider. That, it doesn't matter. I can be in the wilderness, I can be in the desert, I can be in a great place, in a bad place, it doesn't matter. But if I have a need, God is my provider, whatever that need is. All right. Questions, comments, or anything we need to go back over? Lesson 6. Y'all want to go ahead and do the homework, and then we'll come back and actually walk through the lesson. Is that right? Okay.
I see.
The first one is the crossword puzzle. I won't see if you filled it out right, but we'll just check the words, right? So, one across is the river where 12 stones were taken and set up at Gilgal. Jordan River. Number 4, the man to whom the land promise was first given. Abraham. And he was still Abram at the time, right? But he's Abraham. 5 is the city that defeated Israel. Ai. How can that be? Number 6, the people who made a covenant with Israel through deception. The Gibeonites, right? Number 7, the number of spies who went into Jericho. 2. Number 9, the man whose bones were brought out of Egypt at the Exodus. Joseph. And number 10, the number of times Israel marched around Jericho on the 7th day. 7 times. All right, number 2 down, the woman who hid the spies at Jericho. Rahab. Number 3 down, what God sent to destroy the armies of the 5 kings who attacked Gibeon. Hailstones. I'll tell you what. I did a little research on that in the past, and they estimated that some of those hailstones were like 110 pounds. I mean, we ain't talking about like little hail. We're talking about hailstones. That's some hailstones.
Meteor.
Yeah. So some scholars think that they were like super big. Anyway, number 5, the thing which the tribes east of the Jordan built, which angered the tribes on the west of the Jordan. An altar. No, that's the hailstones.
Oh, okay.
Keep me on track though. That's good. Number 8, the man who committed the trespass at Jericho. Achan. Yeah. All right. Extra assignments. Did you do the extra assignments? Good. All right. A preacher on TV was preaching that God will fulfill His promise to Israel and give her the land of Palestine. When this happens, he said Jesus will reign on an earthly throne in Jerusalem. Since we studied in this lesson about the land promise which God gave to Abraham, tell what is wrong in his lesson with his reference to the land promise.
God is not a man that he will lie. And he had already promised that to him and delivered it.
God gave Israel the promised land during Joshua's time. So, you know, it wasn't after that. It was already given.
We already done.
Number 2, draw a small map showing the strategy which Joshua used to capture Ai.
5,000 men on the west and others on the north.
Yeah.
I just-
Hidden, right? And so, you know, they drew them out of the city, and then the ones that were hidden come in and burnt the city down, right? And then they had them all trapped in there.
Run back.
Right.
Too late.
Number 3, what 2 miracles occurred which helped the Israelites to defeat the 5 kings who attacked Gibeon?
God sent hailstones and the sun stood still.
That was Joshua's prayer for the son.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yep.
guessing.
The hailstones and the sun standing still. That was the 2 miracles. Number 4, write a short report for a newspaper on the sin of Achan, its effect on Israel, and his punishment. And for more information, you can read Joshua chapter 6 and 7. I didn't write a report here, but did you write a report?
I
I
did.
did.
All right, let's see. Let's hear it.
The topic is disobedience in the camp.
Disobedience in the camp. News.
In our local news, one man's selfish actions caused the demise of his entire family. A resident of Detroit, Michigan, named Bobby Aiken, disregarded the instructions of his superiors, which strictly forbid any stealing of merchandise found amongst the dead. Mr. Aiken thought he could conceal the merchandise secretly. However, a chain of unexpected events revealed the deception, which caused the poor family to be punished for one man's actions. Now on to it.
Oh my gosh.
That's good. That was good, Jerry. I like that. That was really good. That's
I
right.
just came up with something.
No, that's good. I like that.
I like it too.
That's good.
Very good.
Breaking news. Here, Israel was defeated by Ai due to the fact that Achan was disobedient to the Lord's commandment. Instead of putting the silver and gold in the treasure of the Lord, would you believe he hid some in his tent as if God wouldn't know? Wow.
I love
Right.
that story.
And you know, so let's think about that for a minute. So Israel faces, they're at the Jordan River, they cross over, God tells them it's time for y'all to take the promised land. They get on the other side, all the brothers gotta get hurt. Snip, snip. So they all get circumcised. And so, you know, for several days, they kind of in a weakened position. Well, while they're camped and the guys are healing up, they're eating the food on the land. And so that's why the manna stopped. But that was God's plan. I ain't gonna feed y'all manna all the rest of your lives. Y'all gonna have to
Right.
take care of yourselves. I'll provide for you. I'm giving you a promised land that's flowing with milk and honey, but y'all gonna have to harvest it. So they get ready. Then it's time to go to battle. Here's this big old city, Jericho, over there. But now the people in Jericho are so scared of Israel because they had people see them cross the Jordan River and the water stand up and dry up so that they can cross over on dry land.
Wow.
And then when they got across, then the water started flowing again. And these people are some serious people. Lock the gates. Lock the gates.
Here they come.
We heard what happened down in Egypt, but we just thought that was just, you know, fantastical stories, but it's legit. So they're hiding in there. When God tells Joshua, don't bother about fighting them. Just march around the city. Don't say nothing. Just march around the city. Do that 6 days. Then on the last day, you're going to have to march around it 7 times. Then y'all going to blow the trumpet, y'all going to shout, the walls going to fall down, you're going to take the city. And that's exactly what happened. So now everybody in the region is hearing what happens when you mess with the people of God. Well, Ai is next in line. But what we didn't know is that Achan decided he could try to hide something from God. So he hides in his tent. Nobody knows. Don't nobody know. Didn't nobody rat him out, did they?
No.
Didn't nobody know. And then they get whooped by this little bitty city. How is this possible?
They got ruled by 2 people.
This little city, what is going on? So So there, Joshua was like, okay, God, what happened? He says, well, somebody has broken our covenant. Somebody didn't obey. Well, how are we going to figure out who it is? So, Joshua tells the people, somebody has violated God's rule. Okay, but nobody stepped up to volunteer. Nobody said, it was me. So Joshua said, so we're going to cast lots. We're going to find out who. And so they get 12 straws. Which tribe was it that messed up? Boom, they pull the one tribe. Happened to be Achan's tribe. You think he started sweating it? Like, they had it narrowed. They done done it. I had 12 chances. They picked my tribe. Ooh, that's some odds. So then it goes down and they divided it into the major families in that tribe. Let's just say there's 20 families, So then they narrowed it down to just this one family that Achan belonged to. Ooh, snap.
Real
It's getting
tough.
close. But he still didn't come clean. Then it goes down to the next level. And I think it was like 3 or 4 levels until it was the families at Achan's level. And let's just say there was 10 of those.
His mama, dad.
Or maybe there was 100 of those, because you get lower, there's more, right? So let's say there was 100 families. They pull the straw, and it's Achan's straw. All right, somebody bring Achan up here. He's like, oh, snap.
Now y'all
You're
know.
busted.
Yeah.
But-
you don't want to.
Why wouldn't you come clean before then? I mean, if you know God is directing this investigation, why
You
would
already
you?
busted.
Wouldn't that, I guess give the impression that his faith, that he didn't believe he could get caught?
That's what I was gonna go with.
So,
Yeah,
so
'cause it's, I
He
mean.
really didn't believe God was who he was.
Right. Although he's seen everything that has occurred, you have to be in doubt for you to just continue to think that I can do this and nobody will know.
And even in
Right.
the first place, I think you could hide something in the first place.
So he was slick because he hid it from everybody. Didn't nobody know? I mean, nobody knew.
Except for
The way of God.
Except for his wife.
His wife,
Yeah, 'cause she was sitting on the
Right,
thing,
right,
right where it's hidden, right?
oh,
So,
so she was a party to it.
well, probably. I mean, how's he gonna come in with these armloads of stuff? What you
did
want?
not see it.
Here we go, another Eve. Oh my goodness.
But the bottom line is they hid it from everybody. The whole 2 million plus people, they hid it from all of them. How can you do that? I mean, they were slick. And in our human nature, we won't think we get away with stuff.
Mhm.
We want to think, I got this under control. I've covered my tracks.
Never
I got it
works.
taken care of. But if God is in the investigation, yeah, you can lie to me. You can lie to the pastor. You can lie to your neighbors. You can lie to your family, your friends. You can lie to you can deceive everybody, but you're never going to deceive God. And that's so it's when did he realize I'm fighting against God, not just my people. I'm fighting against
He
God.
probably did until his death.
Till right at the
Still,
end,
laying
it's
up
like,
there still.
You're like,
and yes, him, his wife, his children,
Everybody.
anybody in his household,
Growing them.
all gone.
But even though I know you say we can deceive everybody, but in a sense they didn't, because God ended up giving them discernment to find out who it was actually.
Yeah.
But why would you think you can deceive God? It's like
That's
you
what I'm
said, you can lie to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he lied to everybody, but then
And I ain't even the one
But
that's
you know
gonna
what?
issue your punishment.
Ananias was the same way. They took his and buried his in the tent.
the 12 that walked with Jesus was the same way. They saw all the miracles he was doing.
Yeah,
still.
Yeah, still.
I
Yeah.
don't see how they do that though, but yeah.
No, we do it every day though, honestly. As human beings, we do that type of stuff every day. We'll get in a situation, we'll put ourselves in a situation, and then we're gonna trust God, we're gonna fix it ourselves. I mean, we do it every day. So I mean, going back to that faith thing you was talking about,
Yeah.
I have full faith in God, but when it comes down to certain things, you're gonna try to fix it yourself instead of just say, "Hey, God, it's yours." And
So that's an interesting topic though. So
Very.
where do you draw that line? Where do you draw
Very.
that line? So you can say, all right, I got a situation and I need it fixed. Do I try to do it myself or do I just go to God?
Well, I do, but I believe, and personally for me, the more you spend time with him, the complete surrender's there. He's not gonna allow you, even though your flesh is gonna say, do this. He's not gonna, because you immediately feel, God, I gotta trust you.
Mhm.
Even though your plan looks like it's foolproof, it's gonna be great. It's a conviction that comes over you that will not allow you to get in hot water once the complete surrender is there. I don't wanna do nothing that you didn't say do
Right.
at this point.
And going on with what she said, if you're connected, yes, he gives us power to
That's the
fix certain things, but it's the connection that you have. So if we have the mindset of Jesus or God, then we're gonna go in the right route in order, and we may not fix it. It may be a reason why he said, listen, Jason, I wanted you to jump out there, but it's another lesson for you to learn out there. So that's why I allowed you to go ahead, but it's me that ultimately has to fix this.
So Joshua had a situation. He's leading all these people to capture the promised land. And Jericho went great, just like they planned. Ai did not. And so, okay, God, I did what you said to do. I followed the rules.
Yeah.
Why did this not work?
Because it was a much smaller.
I got a situation. So Joshua could have
Took it
done,
down.
he knew stuff to do. I mean, he could have tried a different plan, a different method of attack. He could have,
But it just didn't make sense. It does not.
but
make
what did he
sense.
do? First thing he did,
Went to God.
he went to God.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. I'm not understanding. It's 10 of us and 2 of them. That's where you be like, Lord, help me.
So, and I think that's the example that the lesson that we need to learn from this is that Joshua had a situation. And although he was the commander, he could have ordered anything to be done because he was the leader. He chose to go to God first to say, God, how do we fix this situation? Something is obviously wrong, and I don't know what it is.
Right.
How do I fix this situation? And God told him what to do. And so he didn't know what the outcome was going to be. He didn't have a clue who
He
it
didn't
was.
know anything, but that's
But he
how
said,
we
I'm
need
listening
to be.
to God.
Right.
And he said, do this. And so we're doing this, okay, that tribe, okay, now we're doing this, okay, that family, and then we're doing this, and that family, and Achan. Brother, what was you doing? So that's a good lesson that we can learn from an Old Testament story.
That is very good.
Whatever my situation is, whether I got myself into it or whether I was brought into it by somebody else, the first thing I need to do is, I may know lots of things to do, but the first thing I need to do is go to God. What do I do? And we may go to God and say, I got 5 things that I think I can do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And God says, well, I don't want you to do any of those. I want you to do this over here. I didn't even think of that. Well, it's a good thing you came to God first, right? Because we could have went through all 5 of them, made the problem 10 times worse, and then we go to God and say, God, I've tried everything I know to do. And he said, well, if you come to me first.
You wouldn't be sweating.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So we go back to the beginning of lesson 6, page 29. The book of Joshua. We're going to have to blaze a trail here. So God promised Abraham 3 things. Y'all remember the 3 things God promised Abraham? I will make of thee a great nation.
Great nation.
You're what?
Give them the land of Canaan.
Through blessed nations through the seed.
Yeah, all the nations will be blessed through your seed, and I'll give you a promised land. All right, so in the Exodus, we can see that God has already answered one of those promises, that they already are a great people. I mean, there's 2 million or so of them, right? And so God bringing the people to Canaan, the book of Joshua is how God gave Israel the land of Canaan. And so that's him answering a second one of those promises. And of course, we know Jesus is the third one, where all the world will be blessed through your seed, Jesus being that seed. So Joshua is believed to be the author of the book, except for maybe a couple of things right at the end, some little things that they think maybe Eleazar or somebody else wrote. And so things to point out here. So before crossing the Jordan, God instructed Joshua two things. Number one, be of good courage, and I will not forsake you. What does that speak to you?
Yes.
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 I mean, if we think about it, you know, this is an example, you know, as Paul said, all these things were written for our example. And if we're called into doing something, if God is leading our life, doesn't matter if we're called to a specific ministry, a pulpit ministry, or you know, a street ministry, or whatever it is, even if you're just
Janitor.
an average Christian, right? Whatever that is, you're still called to live this life. So whatever your calling is, to know that God is saying, be of good courage, I won't forsake you. You know, we don't have to go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish it.
I was just going to say, so we don't have to walk in fear. We don't have to walk in uncertainty. We don't have to walk in frustration. We can have that confidence and have good courage, because we know that regardless of what comes, He said, I will never forsake you.
So that's how I'm trying to live my life now. I made that a focal point of this year, especially. Like, no matter what I'm going through, I know that it's for the good of me, because I'm chasing after God. So I know that even if it's tough times or whatever, I know that it's going to be, in the end, going to be for my good.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I try to live my life now. It's just, every day I go through things and I'll be like, okay, it's going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is, it's going to work out.
So how is your life different today than it was, say, 5 years ago?
I'm not as stressed. I'm a much easier going person, because 5 years ago it was like, Jason got to do this, Jason got to do that. Really wasn't trusting God in everything that He had for me. You know, and He's gonna still take care of me, because that's who He is. And that's His promise to us. But when you're not focused on letting Him be Him, life is a whole lot more stressful.
It is very much so. The connection to Him brings the peace.
Peace, yes.
Keeps
His
you
peace.
in harmony no matter what storm is going on, what is not right. It does not matter.
And it may not be right for us, but it's right to Him.
And the thing about it is asking Him, because He may have worked the situation out, but He worked it out based on what He thought was best, not what you thought was the best route.
Absolutely.
What you wanted.
Absolutely.
You know, so to me it's about being connected, so connected with Him that you are without a shadow of doubt, you know it's gonna be handled.
Yep.
What somebody heard today on the radio, if you're gonna stress, don't pray. If you're gonna pray, don't stress.
It's a
And
waste of
that's
time,
true.
huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's true.
Shalicia's got a quote, I may not get it right, but stress is a down payment on
Oh, it's
Problem.
worry.
Worry.
Worry is a down payment on a problem you may never have.
Because that's the things we worry about. It hadn't happened yet, and it may never happen. Statistically, I read a research thing that was done one time, and they said 95% of the things we worry about never happen. You think about that. Holy cow, 95%? I mean, but if you think about it, yeah, because we worry about all kinds of stupid little things, and most of them never happen. Every once in a while there's a big thing that we worry about, right? That might be deserving of a little worry. But most of the time it's just stupid stuff. And we spend all this worry on it, and it's just a down payment on something that it didn't even happen. You get to that point and it didn't happen. Well, I'm glad it didn't happen. But think about it. How much better would
All
your
this
life have
stress.
been if you hadn't been worried about it for the last 2
How much
weeks?
less gray hair?
All right,
I
so
don't have that problem.
so be of good courage. I will not forsake you.
He stopped worrying.
Now, when they came to Jericho, Joshua had the example that Moses gave when they spied out the land, right? So how many spies did Moses send?
When it's 12.
12, right? And what did we get out of that?
We had 2 brave soldiers out there.
We had 2 people that believed God
2 brave soldiers out
and
there.
10 that did not.
That didn't trust.
They were just going.
And it caused a whole generation to die and not get to go to the promised land.
Wow. Saying that, they're thinking about right now, where we are in today's.
Oh yeah.
Our grandparents really believe, and then as it goes on, you start watching generations fall
Oh yeah. Yeah.
off, and that's
How many
man,
churches are closing their doors? You know,
Right.
like Pastor Frankie was talking at one of the trainings.
Yeah,
You know, closing churches closing
50%.
every day.
yeah.
And it's like, good gracious, closing churches faster than they're opening new ones, right? So Joshua saw that. He took a different path. He just sent in 2 spies, right? And what you bet, he interviewed them before he sent them in. And what you bet, they believed God. Joshua wasn't about to risk having to wander around the wilderness for another 40 years, right?
Sometimes
I want some people that
you
gonna
go
believe God, that gonna be of good courage,
Beat
and
one.
that know that God ain't gonna forsake us.
That's right.
So Joshua, I keep saying Joseph, Joshua sent in those 2 spies, and we know they went in the city, they spied it out, and then they kind of had to hide, right? So where did they end up hiding?
Harlot's house.
Rahab. What was she?
Harlot's.
A harlot. What is a harlot?
That unmentionable woman.
It's a prostitute.
Oh, a lady in the evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way.
That's one of the oldest professions, right?
A lady of the evening.
Oh.
She only work after dark.
Yeah, yeah.
Lady of the evening.
And it ain't because she's a vampire.
Right.
So she was a harlot, she was a prostitute, but she hid these 2 spies. And we know in the story that she told the 2 spies, what did she tell them?
Hey, they come in.
They had already left.
Well, when the spies were
Oh,
there,
the
what did she
message.
tell the spies?
The message, okay.
What did she tell the spies? She told them, these people in this city are scared to death of y'all. Because they heard what happened to Egypt. They heard how y'all crossed over the Jordan, how God parted the waters for you.
They heard it.
And she said, I don't want my family to die. And so I choose y'all. I'm going to hide you, I'm going to protect you, but I'm asking you to spare my family.
Protect us.
Now, that expression of faith, I believe your God is stronger than the kings of this city.
That's right.
That faith put her, where do we see her name later in the Bible? Are y'all aware of that?
No, what?
So we need to go to Matthew.
Yeah.
Let's see.
One and 5.
I ain't got there yet.
Matthew 1 and 5.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. So it's spelled a little bit different here, but it's the same person. So this is, Matthew chapter 1 is the lineage of Jesus. Telling you, Matthew wrote to the Jews. This is, hey, you know, the Messiah is the King of the Jews. And to show you that he is a Jew, that Jesus is a Jew, that here's this lineage. And he goes through and he talks, you know, in verse 3, and Judas begat Phares, and Phares begat, you know, it started back with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and on down the line. And then in verse 5 it says, and Salmon begat Boaz of Rahab, or Rahab. And Boaz begat Obed of Ruth, which we know that story. And Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David, the king. And we know that Jesus descended from the line of David, in one side of his genealogy. So Rahab the harlot, Rahab the prostitute, so David's father was Jesse, his father was Obed, and Obed's mother was Rahab. So what's that, great-grandmother? David's great-grandmother was a harlot, a prostitute. So, when you think about that, just her expression, her faith in God spared her and her whole family and tied her into the very lineage of Christ. I mean, that's significant. All right, so she hid the two spies, and we know ultimately that that they spared her family. Hang the red sash out your window and everything. So to cross the Jordan River, Joshua told the Levites what God had told them: take up the ark and walk into the river. So now, when the children of Israel were coming out of Egypt and they were crossing the Red Sea, they didn't walk in first, right? Moses stretched out his rod and the waters parted, and then they walked in. But this time, God told us to tell the Levites to take up the ark and walk into the water. You're going to have faith. But it says that the minute that all their feet got in the water, whoosh, the water started piling up on this side and the water dried up down this way. And then they all crossed over on dry land. So the Levites did that. The river walled up on one side, dried up on the other. They crossed on dry land. And God had told Joshua to take 12 stones out of the middle of the river. For what reason?
To memorialize them going through.
Right, to make a memorial. Where you get to the place you're going to camp tonight, build this memorial out of these 12 stones. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean to build this memorial?
To show what's on earth.
Yeah, it's a reminder. So these 12 stones, they weren't little rocks, right? These were big rocks. They took these 12 stones, stacked them all together, basically kind of built an altar, right? So that any time any Israelite passed by that, they would know this is a testament that river right there dried up to let my people come over here and take this land. That's my God. And so in our own lives, there are times, and it's time for break, so I'm going to wrap this up here, but in our own lives, we need to sometimes set up memorials. Not memorials to be worshipped, but memorials to remind us to worship. Things that have happened in our lives where I should have died, or I should have been in jail, or I should have got shot, or whatever. And we can build a memorial to those things. We can build a memorial out of those things as a reminder for ourselves to strengthen us. As one place it says that David strengthened himself in the Lord. As he was running from his life. Already anointed to be king, Saul's trying to kill him. He's running for his life, and he's tired. Even his own people had gotten so frustrated, they were turning on him. And he's praying, God, what am I supposed to do? But it says he encouraged himself in the Lord. How did he do that? By going back and looking at all the memorials. How God helped him kill the lion. How God helped him kill the bear. How God helped him kill Goliath. How God had kept him from being killed by Saul all this time. How God had helped him defeat the Philistine. All these things that God had done in his life that he knew I could have done it myself. Had to be God. But every one of those was a memorial that pointed him back to God and say, look, no matter what you're facing, look what you've already been through. Just worship God. You know he's got you. So we'll take a break here.
You believe that someone else could testify? Tell someone else testify?
All right, so we took the stones out of the river, set up the memorial, talked about the importance of that. As we talked about, the lesson talked about that the Canaanites were terrified of the children of Israel. Now, how can that apply to us? I mean, think about who you are. Or maybe I should ask, who are you? Child of God. Now, these children of God, their enemies were terrified of them. Why is that?
Because they saw the wonders.
What was that?
Who their daddy was.
Who their daddy was.
Yeah, they saw the
They-
wonders that
They saw what their God did. You know, and so in our lives, if we don't walk the walk, you know, if we don't walk in the way that God tells us to walk, then the things that He would do in our lives, He don't do because we're not in position. And so the enemies of our soul are not scared of us because we're too busy doing our own thing instead of following God. But when we follow Him,
Yes, sir.
we'll have this situation. Our enemies will be terrified. Which explains when you are serving God, when you're in a right relationship, and you go into certain places, and some people just ugly for no reason. I think Denzel's got this quote, this meme that everybody's posting around now that, you know, how does that go? Oh man, I just lost it. Basically, he's talking about you stir up their demons because of the spirit you bring, basically. So when you're living right, you've got God's Spirit with you. When you go into an area, and that's,
They don't like your spirit because it aggravates their demons.
yeah, so they don't like you because your spirit aggravates their demons, right? It's not about you, it's about the spirit you bring. You know, and when God is blessing you, when His blessing is all over you, it irritates them. And it's because it's region. It's region. This promised land was occupied by other people, the people of Canaan. You know, the Canaanites and the Amorites and the Moabites and, you know, all these folks. They were all pagans. They didn't worship Jehovah God. God sends His people and said, I've claimed that land for you and I'm going to put you in it. And when they come in, all of these, we ain't giving up our land. And so they had to fight for it. And our enemies, our spiritual enemies, they don't want to give up territory either. They don't want to give up territory at work. They don't want to give up territory in your home. They don't want to give up territory in your neighborhood. They don't want to give up territory anywhere. And so when you go in an area, if you're walking in alignment with God, it irritates whoever's ruling that region. And that's why you get attacks. That's good.
No, finish out. Well, that's really, really good. That's really good.
Well, thank you. Here we go.
No, it's like though. I mean, and I never thought about it till you just put it in perspective. That even though God has promised us stuff, things that we still may have to fight for those things. Even though He gave them that land, they still had to fight for that land. He promised it to them. Now you have to go in and fight. And that's the same thing with us. Every day we have situations that we get in. You may have to fight for what's yours. He promised it to you. You might have to fight for it.
Right.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
But we can go back to what He told us, be of good courage. I won't forsake you. So
Yeah,
even if
yeah.
I'm going into a fight, I go in knowing I'm going to win this fight.
Yep.
Amen.
Not can I win.
I'm
I'm going to win because
Yes.
God put me in the fight.
Yes, sir.
And if He brought me to it, He going to bring me through it.
Amen.
All right, the Canaanites were terrified. God told Joshua to circumcise all of the men because they had stopped doing that. You know, with Abraham, God developed the covenant, and the covenant was signified by that circumcision. So every man that was born was circumcised. That was the sign that you were in covenant with God. And so as they're wandering around in the wilderness, they stopped doing that. And so now here you had a whole generation that had never been circumcised. And so God said, we need to renew the covenant, reestablish the covenant. So all those men, from the little boys up to the full-grown men, every one of them had to be circumcised. So, you know, I can't imagine me and Jason and Leonard being our age, and they say, here's what we're going to have to do. Well, wait a minute. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about this. But it had to be done. If you wanted to be in covenant with God, that was a requirement. And then also they held the first Passover in the land of Canaan. You know, so the Passover was established in Egypt while they were still slaves, because the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, it would have hit them if they were not in covenant, if they had not celebrated the Passover, killed the sacrificial lamb, put the blood on their doorpost. That death angel was taking every firstborn. It didn't matter who you were. But if you were covered by the blood, you were safe. And that just speaks to Jesus. If you're covered by the blood, you're safe. All right, so that once they crossed the Jordan, they did these things. They did circumcision. They celebrated the Passover again. In Gilgal, this is where they camped after they crossed the river. Israel ate the food of the land, and the manna stopped. So the manna, when did the manna come? That was last week, right? You wasn't here.
Wasn't it, when they first left and got to Mount Sinai?
We starved to death out here. God, you brought us out here to kill us.
Back.
We could have just had to, we could have been eating that garbage back in Egypt. So God sent the manna because they were complaining, but God was flexing for them. I mean, you're saying, look, I am your provider. You ain't ever, they didn't even know what to call it. That's what manna is. We don't even know what this is, manna. It was bread from heaven, you know. And so, the manna came and fed them all this time. The whole time they wandered around the wilderness. 40 years. Now, you think, well, they probably got fed and tired of it, but I mean, if you think about it,
It could be something.
anything. I want to challenge y'all. We have good services, and God does good things. But when it happens all the time, it's easy to get used to it and take it for granted.
Yeah.
These kind of services don't happen in every church.
True.
And so we really need to make a point of appreciating God for it. Because the minute we start taking it for granted,
Yes, sir.
He's going to pick up that fire and He's going to move it to some place where they will appreciate it.
Mm.
So I just throw that in. That wasn't in the notes.
Is that what he's doing with chicken right now? I've been enjoying it for 40 years, I know. It's hard to find now.
Chicken.
All right, so before moving on Jericho, Joshua met God's messenger, the captain of the host, and he had his sword drawn. Did y'all read about that? I think Joshua was a little scared, right? Now, whose side are you on? And basically, he said, what did he say? Whose side did he say he was on? He said he's on God's side. He wasn't on Israel's side. He wasn't on Jericho's side. He was on God's side. So if y'all want to fight with God, you get on my side. So for fear, Jericho had locked themselves in the city. God told Joshua, how to defeat the city, march around the sides. But that last day, the priests would blow their trumpets and the people would shout and the walls would fall. They said, kill everybody. Take the gold and the silver for God's treasury. But we know that Achan disobeyed. And then Israel failed at Ai. And we went through that whole thing about how, Achan got exposed by the casting of lots. And, but he didn't confess until he was busted. And, it's just, we've all done that. But it don't make sense to do it. I mean, we all do it, but why do we do it? I mean, it's just, why? We refuse to come clean. We refuse to confess. We want to see if we can just keep it hid. And I know it really, I guess, comes down to a pride thing, right? Because we don't want people to think we did bad things. We don't want to be seen as messing up. We don't want to be seen as, not perfect or whatever. But we ain't perfect. It is going to come out.
Yeah, so it's too late to be not wanting somebody to see it.
How many times have you known about something going on that you knew somebody was hiding, but they thought they was going to get away with it? I mean, I've seen it several times, and you just want to tell them, that it's eventually going to come out. I ain't going to tell them, but
It may
it's
not be as bad if you go ahead and tell them.
it's going to come out. I mean, it's inevitable. Either somebody sees you, or you start acting guilty. Somehow, some way, it always comes out.
Truth comes out.
It may be sooner, it may be later. You may get away with it for a while, but sooner or later, it's going to come out. But people are convinced that they're going to be the exception. Ain't nobody ever going to know. So Achan got exposed. He was, they defeated then Ai in the next fight. And then they went on to read the blessings and the cursings at Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. So now they're in the land. They've defeated Jericho. They've defeated Ai. They moved on, and then these people, the Gibeonites, they were scared too. They didn't want to fight Israel. So what did they do?
Try to be slick.
Oh yeah.
That's joint.
And they was pretty slick.
They were.
Let's be their friend.
Look, get all your raggedy old clothes and get some old moldy bread and pack it up in your stuff and let's get on the road. And we're gonna go meet them. And we're gonna act like we've been on the road for a while. And we're gonna tell them, hey, we want to be with y'all. And they won't know who we are. Because God had told them, don't make a covenant with any of these people in the land because it'll be to your destruction. It won't be good for you. But instead of going to God, they just accepted that the people were telling them the truth. And then made the covenant with them. And it turned out they were deceiving them. So, you know, it did cause them some problems. So the Israelites made a covenant with them. And so now they've made a commitment to defend the Gibeonites if something happened where they needed help. And sure enough, you know, these 5 kings heard that their neighbors, the Gibeonites, done turned state on them. The Gibeonites done went to the other side. Who do they think they are? We're going to go kill them all. So these 5 kings get together and they go down to destroy the Gibeonites. So the Gibeonites sent a messenger to Joshua and said, hey, you remember that covenant we made with one another? Y'all promised to help us. We're getting attacked. And so Joshua was like, well, man, we don't want to do this, but we got to. We made a promise. So they run down there and they start fighting with them. And so God honored the children of Israel, even though they didn't do what God said. But God helped them anyway, sent those hailstones to start killing a bunch of the enemies. And then the day was getting long and it was starting to get dark. And Joshua was like, look, we're winning. If we don't finish them off now, they'll get away. So we prayed, God, let the sun stand still so we can defeat our enemies. And it did. So they finished the battle, defeating all their enemies there. And so Joshua's campaign then caused Israel to defeat 31 kings. 31. Did y'all know that before you read that in the lesson? So to take over the land of Canaan, the promised land, they had to defeat 31 kings. What's the significance of 31 there? Does that remind you of anything? How many days are in a lot of months? 31. It's kind of like every month. Every day of the month, there's a king we got to fight against. Somebody that wants to defeat us. Somebody that wants to get us off track. Somebody that wants to get us out of the will of God. But if we want to stay in the promised land, we got to defeat all those kings. But be of good courage, because he won't forsake you. All right. So Israel defeated those 31 kings, but unfortunately they didn't drive out all of the Canaanites that were there. Some of them got left, including the Gibeonites. And so Joshua then starts dividing the land. We know that the Levites did not get any land, right? Because the Levites' inheritance was the tabernacle, right? But God did have Joshua to give them 48 cities. So that works out to basically 4 cities in each tribe, right? 12 tribes, 4 cities. And so that was so that the Levites could be distributed through the whole kingdom of Israel and keep the people in right relation, right standing with God. And then they set up the tabernacle where the presence of God would be. They set up the tabernacle in a town called Shiloh. And then they also set up 6 refuge cities. What y'all think about the refuge cities?
Places where they could go if they had to.
Yep. If you on somebody's house and you swing an axe or something, come down in somebody's head. It was an accident. You didn't mean to do it. But back then, a lot of people lived eye for eye, tooth for tooth. You killed my brother, I'm gonna kill you. And so these people could go to these refuge cities, and they were safe. That somebody couldn't take retribution from them. They couldn't come in and kill them because they were safe there. But they kind of had to stay at that city. So it's kind of a trade-off. Then we are reminded that Reuben and Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh went back over the Jordan and built their altar. Now, they wanted to settle on the east side because they had a lot of flocks, right? And they defeated the Moabites and the Amorites over there. They said, well, look, there's a lot of good land here. Let us just get our inheritance here. And do y'all remember what Moses told them?
Before they went to war.
Yeah, he said, if you're going to take this land, you got to make a commitment that you will go and help your brethren fight for their land. Because they helped you fight for yours. You're not going to settle over here and then just sit and watch. Yeah. So they said, okay, very well, we'll go in and we'll lead the fight. And so then once they captured everything, then they were able to go back home. So they built this altar, and it caused a stir, right? So the 9.5 tribes that were on the west side, they felt like that these 2.5 tribes on the east side were doing something wrong here, right? Because they built this altar. So, wait a minute, you can't offer sacrifices over there. You got to come to the tabernacle, which is in Shiloh. But they came back and said, look, we're not building it to offer sacrifice. We built it as a witness that we too are partakers in the covenant with God. It was kind of a memorial, right? Mm-hmm. And just a reminder that, hey, there is an altar at the tabernacle where we offer sacrifice, but this one is a reminder of us that we need to stay in that covenant. And then we come down, so I wrote down the quote here. You know, we hear this quoted a lot. Choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's in Joshua 24, verses 14 and 15. So that was at the end of Joshua's life. You know, he's trying to encourage the people to stay faithful to God. You know, he had lived, it says he died at 110, was buried there in Shechem. He had led the people through all these battles. He had been a slave and became the leader of this whole nation and defeated 31 different kings. I mean, ain't too many leaders could say that. I mean, he was the man. But he told them, said, look, I've led you by example. You saw what Moses did. You've seen what I did. Keep God's word in front of you all the time, just like Moses said. Keep yourself reminded of the goodness of God and stay in that right relationship. All right, that's the end of chapter 6. Any questions, comments? We've got about 25 minutes. Anything y'all wanted to go over a little more or different? All right. Lesson 7. Let's talk about the judges. So Israel went in and they captured the mountain regions first, but then they couldn't beat the fortified cities in the battle. And because they couldn't drive out all the Canaanites, even though they had basically beaten all the kings, there were still pockets of them where they didn't go in and ultimately drive them out. And because they left them there, that influence caused Israel to sin and worship Baal, the god of the Canaanites. And it's kind of like, from the medical perspective, it's like cancer. So if you know that a body has cancer, and you go in and you say, well, we cut most of it out. Well, that ain't what you want to hear. Get it all out, because I don't want it growing more, And if you leave it in there, that's what it does, right? It's just going to grow more. And so in our life spiritually, we know physically that cancer, what it does, spiritually in our life, the same thing happens. So if we go to God, I need you to help me, I need you to clean me up, I need you to do this, do that. And God starts working on us, but then we hold that one part and we say, well, I want you to clean all that up, but I'm going to hold on to this. And well, then it ain't gonna do no good. Because this right here is gonna turn into more mess than you had before. Because it's just gonna keep on growing. And so that's what happened with the children of Israel here. They didn't follow through like God said and get rid of all of those Canaanites. And it became a cancer for them that kept drawing them into idolatry over and over and over. So they worshiped the god of Baal. God allowed the Canaanites, because of this, God allowed the Canaanites, the Philistines, the Midianites, and others to oppress Israel. So Israel at this time didn't have any kind of central government, right? So it wasn't the united 12 tribes of Israel. It was just 12 tribes. It was basically 12 families of cousins that lived close to one another. And so if you fought against one of them, well, they all probably gonna gang up on you and come back at you, but they'd have to know, they'd have to get together and talk about it, right? But if they'd had a king, or if they'd had some kind of central government, they could, all the time be talking about, hey, we got these people over here that's attacking Gad, and we need to go help them. Or, hey, these people down here fighting against Ephraim, we need to go help them. They didn't have that. And so you didn't have a strong opposition to your enemies. It started with, this one tribe getting attacked, they would try to fight and defend themselves, and then when they're getting whooped, then somebody would hear about it and it would start spreading through and others would come to help, but it just took more time. And so because of this, God raised up judges. These judges basically, for the most part, were just military leaders that God would raise up that would rally Israel together to get them to join together to fight their enemies. You might think of it like evangelists or preachers or prophets today that encourage believers to band together to pray for things, or to come together to affect change in the community, or come together for any kind of to do the food pantry, to minister to the community to a physical need, that these people need this food. But if believers don't get together, two individuals by themselves just can't hardly do it, right? You got to have a team of people working together. So God allowed all this oppression. He raised up these judges, and the period of judges lasted about 300 years. So, they were 400 years in Egypt as slaves. Moses goes and brings them out, gets them to the promised land. Joshua takes them into the promised land. They go through and take a few years to defeat these 31 kings. And then from that time, once Joshua died, about 300 years, they had this period of the judges. And so they listed many of the judges here. So the first one, Othniel, he was actually the son-in-law of Caleb, which remember Joshua and Caleb. And he defeated the Mesopotamians after their oppression. Then you had Ehud, who was a left-handed individual. And it's kind of interesting in his story. There was this king, Eglon, who was the one that was oppressing them. And Eglon was known to be this big, huge, fat man. I mean, big. And Ehud was left-handed. Now, most people are right-handed. The majority of the population are right-handed. So the right-handed guy would have his sword on the left side. And so Ehud had hidden this sword on his thigh under his robes. And when they went to frisk him, they checked to make sure, because, everybody's right-handed, just check the left side, make sure you ain't got no knife or sword or something. They didn't find nothing, but he had it hid on the right side because he's left-handed. So he asked to have an audience with the king because he was having to pay the extortion money. He brought the money and gave it to him, and he said, hey, can I talk with you for a minute? And so he sent all the people out because he's clean. My people have checked him. He ain't got no weapons. So he gets in there and quickly draws out the sword. They say it was about a span length, so estimating 18 inches. Now this is how big this guy is. He jabs it in the guy, goes in so far that it took the whole blade and the handle, and then his fat wrapped around it, and he couldn't pull it out. He just had to leave it in there. And it says in the dirt came out. So basically stabbed into his intestines, and stuff started running out. So nasty, but that's what happened. But he killed that king, and it defeated the oppression. That's what God raised him up to do. Then we talk about Shamgar. Shamgar killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad. Do you know what an ox goad is? I had to look it up.
Yes. One of those things that you actually like.
It's basically a cattle prod.
Yeah, there you go.
So back then, they didn't have electronic ones, right, to shop with, but they would have a long stick, it would have a good solid end on one end and a pointy end on the other. So they could whack them with it, or they could poke them with it. And so basically it was just a big cattle prod. And so he took this cattle prod and killed 600 Philistines who were oppressing Israel at the time. He was a man.
That's command.
And he didn't even have super strength like Samson, we hear about later, right? I mean, he was just a man. Then we have Deborah. Now, Deborah told Barak to go against and fight King Jabin and his general Sisera, who had 900 chariots. But Barak was afraid. And he said, well, I'm not going to go fight unless you go with me, Deborah. And Deborah told him, said, well, if I go with you, you won't get credit for the victory. The credit will be given to a woman. Now, Deborah was a prophet, but she was also a judge. And so she prophesied that, you know, if you go and you make me go with you, you're not going to get credit for the victory, but credit will be given to a woman. And sure enough it did, because even though they went, God sent some rain, which defeated the chariots. So on foot, they were no match for these chariots. They could just run them over. They were much faster and stronger and all that stuff. But the rain made the ground muddy. They couldn't use the chariots. So now it's kind of evened out the fight. And Sisera, they started whooping them. And Sisera, the general, he started running to hide. And he ran to this one place, and he hid in this woman's tent. The lady's Jael, she was a Kenite. And so she gave him some warm milk, and he was, you know, after all that adrenaline rush, he's coming down off of that adrenaline rush, he's tired, and she hid him under a rug, wrapped up in a rug in her tent. You know, he thinks he's safe, he passes out, goes to sleep after he drunk that warm milk. But she took a tent peg on his temple and drove it right through his temple and killed him. So the victory went to a woman, just like Deborah prophesied. You know, and Barak, even though he was the leader of the army, he didn't get the credit, just like she told him. You guys heard? All right, that takes us to Gideon. We probably all heard of Gideon. So Gideon was at a time when the Midianites and the Amorites were oppressing Israel, and God sends a messenger to Gideon and, you know, calls him out. But Israel it was so bad, they were oppressing them so bad, that they had to flee into the mountains. They had to hide just to live in their own land. And so they couldn't even harvest their crops. They had to do that in secret. And that's exactly where we find Gideon. He was hiding from his enemies, trying to thresh wheat in a wine press. So do you know the significance of that? Do you know what threshing wheat is?
Separated.
Right. So basically back then you didn't have all these fancy machines that do it now. They would have to take the wheat in bundles and they would beat it on the floor, right, to knock the wheat off. And then they would take baskets and they would scoop up everything they beat off and they would toss it up in the air. And the threshing floors were in high open spaces. And so they would toss it up in the air. The heavy wheat wouldn't get caught by the wind. It would fall and all that light chaff would blow away. So that's how they separated it. So he is trying to thresh wheat, but he's down in a wine press. Now what's the significance of a wine press?
It actually smashes everything up.
Right, so that's where you crush the grapes to collect the juice, right? But how do you collect liquid, right? You got to get it lower than where you started. It's got to run to someplace. So the wine presses were usually in low spots, not in the high place where you have the wind. So he's trying to thresh this wheat, but he's down in this hole where they crush the grapes for the wine. You know, it's just a bad situation. You know, he's doing the right thing in the wrong place. He's hiding from his enemies, but God sends him a messenger that says, Gideon, thou mighty man of valor. What? The message here to us, God calls us what we are, not how we're acting. Gideon wasn't acting like a mighty man of valor, right? He was hiding from his enemies. Gideon was doing the right thing, but he was doing it in the wrong place. You know, and that's the way we find ourselves a lot of times. But God still calls us what we are, and his purpose for doing that is he's calling us into what we're supposed to be. So when we're not there yet, he's still calling us that and drawing us to it, just like he did with Gideon. So he tells Gideon, you know, to go and start fighting against the enemies. So the first thing Gideon did, his father, his very own father, was a Baal priest, if you will. He had a big Baal idol that all people would come by and worship. And so Gideon destroyed his father's Baal image. And when he did, of course, the whole region wanted to kill him. You know, bring your son out here. And I find it funny because Gideon's father told him, said, well, you know, if Baal's all that, then let Baal fight for himself. You know, won't kill my son. Let Baal fight for himself if he's so good. So, you know, that's kind of an interesting thing. You know, I think what it says is that Gideon's father wasn't a Baal worshiper, he was a money worshiper. Because people would bring their offerings and their sacrifices to the Baal idol, and of course he got to keep that, right? Because it was his idol. So Gideon is hearing God tell him to go fight the enemies, and Gideon's like, how am I going to do this? You know, I got to know this is God. So flashback to Moses. I can't do this. I ain't prepared for this. I ain't got the right skills. So Gideon's telling God all the same stuff, and so he puts out. You've heard putting out a fleece. You know, God, I need to put out a fleece. I need an answer from you. This is where that comes from. Gideon put out the fleece. He says, God, if this is what you want me to do, then let the fleece be wet, but let all the ground be dry. How can that happen if it's dew and only the fleece is wet? You know. So he puts it out. Sure enough, that's what happens. And Gideon says, okay, well that's good, God. That's good, God. Let one more time. One more try. This time, let the fleece be dry, but let all the ground be wet. Next morning, that's exactly what happened. So Gideon's kind of out of excuses, right? God done answered all of his fleeces. So he's giving him these two signs. So he calls for an army, and 32,000 men show up. Now, that's still way less than the 130-something thousand that the enemy had, but, you know, 32,000, they had a fighting chance, right? But God tells Gideon, that's too many. Y'all might think y'all did something by yourself. He said, I want you to go out there and you tell any of them, if any of you got any fear at all, if y'all afraid at all, you just go on home. We got this. 22,000 of them went home. I mean, think about that. Here's all your friends and neighbors and cousins and whatnot, and you know you're fixing to go fight this army that's over 100,000 people. And you say, okay, we're going to go home because we're scared. We're going to let y'all do it. All right, well, that left them with 10,000, you know, which is still a big number, but it ain't nothing compared to 130,000. So then God told Joshua, said, you still got too many. Joshua's looking at the people, looking at God, looking at the people, looking at God. God, what are you talking about? So he says, take them down the river, and all the ones that lap water like a dog, keep them, but tell the other ones that they got to go home.
That's what I want me to.
So what's the significance of that, lapping like a dog?
Yeah, do what you tell them.
It's the way they drunk the water. So do what now?
They obedient.
To lap like a dog, they lick it up, right? The other guys, they just put their head down and drunk it right out of the water. They couldn't see nothing.
Yeah, he gonna see.
The ones that were watching, that was the ones that God wanted.
Okay.
So the ones,
Yeah.
so the ones that were lapping like a dog, he knew was keeping an eye on what's going on.
It wasn't gonna get
And
slapped.
it ended up only being 300 people. 300 men against 130, I think it was 132,000 men.
Oh,
So Gideon's like, oh Lord, 300, that's all I get? So, and that ain't all. They didn't even have no weapons. Because the enemy had taken all the blacksmiths. They couldn't make any, they couldn't even make their own, like, plowing stuff. They had to go get from their enemies to be able to plow and stuff. And then, of course, they'd plant their gardens, and then the enemy would come and take it from them. Just a bad situation. So all they had, they armed them with trumpets, empty pitchers, and torches. Boy, they sound like bad men, doesn't they? But God gave them the direction. God told Gideon what to do. So Gideon lined them all up. They found the enemy was camping down in this valley, so they got around them, all around the mountain around them. He spread these 300 men out all around the mountain to surround them. So now you're not even 300 men. You're 2 or 3 men in one spot, 2 or 3 men in another spot, 2 or 3 men in another spot, and you're looking down at this army that's 130. I mean, think about it. Okay, you watch football, you see, Alabama or Auburn or, any of the big SEC schools, and you see that stadium when it's full. That's about 100,000. They're going to fight 130,000. That's how many people that is. And you got 300, but you're spread out, so you're just 2 or 3 people at one spot. And all you got is a trumpet, a pitcher, and a torch. What in the world? I mean, the things that God asked us to do don't even make no sense. I mean, what would you do? God, really? God. So, God told them to attack at night. Now, the reason for that is because God had a plan. We got to know that. Whatever God's telling us to do, it's not because God's random. He got a plan. And I'm running out of time. So, they attacked at night. What they did is they put the torches in the pitchers, right? And when Gideon gave the signal and said, break your pitcher so that your torch will shine, and blow your trumpets, and shout Gideon and the sword of the Lord, And so this mountain, they're surrounded. When you're on a mountain and you start hollering, you get the echo, and these torches start shining in the middle of the night. All of a sudden, you got torches all around the mountain. These guys down in the valley, God put panic on them. They thought they had been surrounded because they thought Gideon had got some help. We really surrounded now. We're going to get massacred down here. They panicked and started killing one another. And so Gideon led Israel into victory over the Midianites, which was awesome. But then he turned right around and then he led Israel back into idolatry. It just don't even make sense, but that's what he did. And then he had 70 sons. 70 sons. One of them was Abimelech. And Abimelech is counted among one of the judges, but he killed 68 of his brothers. The only one that survived, Jotham, he escaped, but then he went and told a story on his brother and got the people that had put him in charge, got them people to turn against him. And so while Abimelech's trying to punish them for turning against him, a woman takes a millstone and chucks it out a window where he had them pinned up in this tower, and the millstone fell on his head, crushed him, killed him. So, just some crazy stories. And then you got Jephthah. Jephthah was a thug. He was born out of wedlock, to a prostitute. So he was driven out. You don't even belong here. You're not part of us. He went and put together a group of men that they were called vain men, powerful, vain men. But then they were under attack, and so the Gileadites asked him for help. Said, "Hey, why don't you come help us?" Because they knew that Jephthah and his boys could fight. And Jephthah said, "Well, we'll come help you, but you got to make me king." And they said, "Well, okay, we'll do that." So they agreed, and he came. But he made a vow. He made a vow. He said, "God, if you will give me victory, then the first thing comes out of my tent, I will sacrifice it to you." Now, he obviously wasn't thinking. And that's the lesson that we need to get from him, is that when you make a vow to God, you better think about what you're vowing. You got to think about what you're vowing. Because it turned out God did give him the victory, and when he got home, the first thing out the door was his daughter. just broke down. I made this commitment, I made this promise to God, I've gotta do this. And so, long story short, he shouldn't have done it, but he shouldn't have made the vow. He was being faithful to try to keep his vow, but it's just a testament that we need to really think. In one place it says count the cost. What is it that you're committing? What is it that you're doing? So then we find that the tribe of Ephraim got angry because they didn't get an invitation to fight, and that created a civil war. And 42,000 of the tribe of Ephraim died. That brings us to Samson. Samson, his father was Manoah, his mother was barren, but an angel had promised a child and said he will need to have a Nazirite vow. So it told you about that. Don't cut his hair, don't drink fruit of the vine. But he fell in love with a Philistine woman. But the Philistines were the one that were oppressing him. And so they were going to get married, and he put together this riddle, about out of the strong came sweet, and I can't even remember how the riddle goes now. But anyway, so the people there, they made this bet. He said, if you can figure the riddle out, then I'll pay you. And it was for 30 changes of clothes. Well, they kept harassing his fiance. Hey, you need to tell us the answer because we ain't about to lose to this Israelite. And so she finally coaxed him to tell her the answer, and then she went and ratted it out. And so Samson lost the bet, and he had to give them 30 changes of clothes. Well, he went down to another village and killed 30 more Philistines and brought their clothes to pay his debt. Then another time, he went and while he was gone, they gave his wife to another man. So now he's mad. He catches 300 foxes, ties their tails together 2 by 2, and sets them on fire and puts them out in their fields and burns up all their fields. So they were mad at that, and then, but how long would it take you to catch 300 foxes?
So he is a bad boy.
How fast would you have to be, right? And then, he went down. They threatened his village. He said, we're going to kill all of y'all if y'all don't bring Samson to us. So he submitted to him, let him take him. And he turned around and he killed 1,000 Philistines, with the jawbone of an ass. And then God made water come out of that jawbone after he'd done all that fighting. He was starving. He was dehydrated. He was heat stroke or whatever, and he said, now I'm going to die because I got no drink. And God made water start coming out of this jawbone. But then he fell in love with a harlot, he went into a harlot in Gaza, another Philistine trap. He found out about the trap, and he snuck out at night, took the city gates, and carried them to the top of a mountain that was close to the city. Now, number one, they're sitting there waiting on him to come out. How did he get out without them seeing him? He was slick. Number two, he goes to the city gates, and they were waiting on him, but somehow he's able to take the city gates. I mean, think about it. Have you ever seen the gates to a city? That ain't small. These are big things. But he somehow rips the gates of the city off and carries them by himself up on top of a mountain. This man was a man. So then he falls in love with Delilah. And we saw those little videos. She gonna rely on you. But she found out that the secret to his strength was his hair. And so she caused him to go to sleep, cut his hair, and they ended up gouging his eyes out and made him a slave. What we should learn from Samson is that at this point, it doesn't matter how gifted by God you are. If you don't appreciate that gift, you still will be whooped by the enemy. I mean, he was the strongest man that ever lived. Nobody could hold him. Nobody could beat him. He beat himself because he gave away his secret. And then the Philistines brought him in to mock him, but his hair had grown back. Even though he was still blind, he prayed, God, one more time, give me strength. He broke the pillars down and killed more in his death than he did in his own life. That brings us to basically the end of the book of Judges, where this phrase is stated. It said that everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And, I think that speaks a lot to where we're at today. Again, everybody doing what's right in their own eyes. Don't judge me. I'm doing what's right and for me. Don't tell me I gotta comply with the way you believe, because I'm doing what's right for me. Everybody has moved away from the idea that there is absolute truth. And we've got to stand on the Word, which is absolute truth. The Word of God is absolute truth. Then there's this little story in there about Micah's idol, and how they got this Levite to, give up on God and leave him in this idol worship. And then also the story about the Levite that had the harlot concubine, and at Gibeah they raped her and she died the next morning. So he took her home, cut her in 12 pieces, sent all the pieces to the different tribes. And all the tribes came together, and Benjamin was going to defend Gibeah, which Gibeah is in the land of Benjamin. And Benjamin was going to defend her, the city. But all the tribes fought against them and almost wiped out the whole tribe of Benjamin. So there were no Benjamin women left, and there was only, 6,000? 600? Yeah, 600 men left. So they got together, held a council, and decided, hey, we need to go find a way to get some wives for these guys so that the tribe of Benjamin don't die out. And so they joined together and did that. And that brings us to the end of the book of Judges. Questions, comments? We're a little bit over, but
7, chapter 7, 8, 9.
so next week you will turn in homework. That'll be on October 4th. You'll turn in homework for chapter 7 and 8, and we will teach through lessons 8 and 9.
Next week will be 7, 8.
Did I just say that?
I just want to make sure there's an echo in this
Let
room.
me say it again, because you asked me, now I gotta look at it, make sure I'm telling it again.
Yeah.
Alright, so homework next week is 7 and 8. Bring 7 and 8 for homework. And then I will teach through 8 and 9. Alright, appreciate y'all's attention, being here and everything.